In this video, I will provide you with something that I used to use when I was straightening wall framing studs, and that was to simply move the bottom and the top of the wall framing stud over, or just the bottom, so that I wouldn't need to do as much planing on the one side or adding shims on the other side. And even though I'm not going to be providing you with all the details on how you straighten wall framing studs, I will provide you with an example of how I did it and the reasons why. So let's go ahead and get started with this right here. You can see where the wall framing stud is even with the top side of the wall framing plate and the bottom of the wall framing plate, and is a straight stud. In our next example, we're going to take a look at the same thing, except we're going to have a bowed stud. And you can see here where we have a gap between the straight edge and the face of the wall framing stud. And hopefully this makes sense. If not, let's just go ahead and kind of zoom around here to make sure that you know what we're looking at here. A bowed wall framing stud that is flush with both sides of the wall framing plates. And to straighten this wall framing stud, we're going to need to remove one side of the wall framing stud with a planer, which would be this area here, and we're going to need to add materials on the other side. And this is a common way of straightening studs. And I see carpenters using this method all the time, even when there are extreme cases where the studs are bowed more than an inch. And I'm here to tell you, you don't have to do that. If you simply move the wall framing stud over at the top a little bit. So in our example here, I moved it over 1/4 of an inch, and the wall framing stud has a 1/2 inch bow in the center. So again, we're going to be adding here, removing over here, adding on this side, and then doing the same that we did up here at the bottom. And it's going to provide us with a little stronger stud. So instead of having a wall framing stud where we've removed a 1/2 inch on one side, we're only going to remove 1/4 of an inch on that side. And it's going to give us a 3 1/4 inch wall framing stud all the way down, instead of having a 1/2 inch planed out of the center. And I will leave it up to you as to whether or not you think this is going to work better for your project. So again, I just simply moved the framing stud over 1/4 of an inch at the bottom and at the top. And we're going to be removing this part with a planer and then doing the same thing at the top. And we're actually going to be removing less materials, which means we're probably going to be adding less materials also. So hopefully this makes sense, because in our last example, we're going to take a look at what's left over on the wall framing stud. So in the example I just showed you, we're going to have a little bit more if we do it my way than we will if we take and leave the stud where it's at. And for those of you who like math, you cannot argue with the numbers. Here they are. And this is a 92 1/4 inch tall wall framing stud with a 1/2 inch bow in it. So we're going to need to remove a 1/2 inch from the center if we leave it where it's at, and 1/4 of an inch if we move it over. And I went ahead and made another example. I went ahead and created a wall framing stud with a 1 inch bow in it, and left it where it was, moved it over 1/4 of an inch, and then moved it over a 1/2 inch. Let's go ahead and zoom in on the bottom here. Again, I moved this over a 1/2 inch on this one and 1/4 of an inch on this one here. And my guess is that most people are going to remove a wall framing stud with a 1 inch bow in it and replace it anyway. And for those of you who are not going to do that, let's just take a look at the numbers right here. They don't lie. You're going to benefit, because this method here is going to provide you with more surface area for the existing wall framing stud, providing us with a better method for building.